My husband left me for his secretary, mocking my boring life as a mom. 3 years later, his ex-secretary showed up at my office begging me to hire him back. He says you're the only one who ever believed in him. It's strange, the way life changes without warning. One morning, you're packing your kids' lunches and checking grocery lists, and the next, your husband of 8 years is telling you he's leaving you for someone who gets him. Who laughs at his jokes? Who wears lipstick and heels at 8 a.m.? Her name was Clara. She worked as his secretary. I'd met her once, twice, maybe, at a Christmas party. I remember she had this high, tinkly laugh and the kind of confidence that only comes from not yet knowing what real heartbreak feels like. Russell started staying late at the office. I didn't question it at first. I wanted to believe we were just going through a rough patch. The twins were still toddlers. I barely slept. We didn't talk like we used to. But I thought it was just the season we were in. Until it wasn't. Until one evening, while I was folding laundry in the living room, he came home and said, calmly, like he was mentioning the weather, "I think I'm done." Done with what? This. Us. I'm not happy, Marin. I haven't been for a long time. He didn't say Clara's name then. He didn't have to. I already knew. I remember driving to my parents' house with the girls the next day. I told them we were going on a little vacation. I cried the entire way there and wiped my face clean before getting them out of the car. I didn't want them to see me breaking. Those first few weeks were a blur. Divorce attorneys. Mediation. Crying into pillowcases. Clara moved in with him just a few weeks later. She posted a photo of their new condo on Instagram. I wasn't even following her, someone sent it to me. In the caption, she wrote, "Found my person, my home, my peace." I laughed so hard I cried. Not because it was funny. Because it was so far from the truth, it hurt. Russell didn't fight for joint custody. He saw the girls every other weekend, when he remembered. Sometimes he canceled last minute. Sometimes he'd send a last-minute text saying he was overwhelmed with work and would make it up next time. He didn't make it up. Meanwhile, I started clawing my way back. I picked up more hours at work. My boss noticed. Gave me better projects. I did late-night calls after the girls went to bed. I studied trends, taught myself new tools, and slowly built something real. By the time 2 years had passed, I had made a name for myself. I wasn't just surviving, I was leading campaigns that were bringing in big clients. I had my own team, a flexible schedule, and my confidence back. The girls were thriving too. Madeline joined the school orchestra. Nora adopted a stray kitten from the backyard and named him Pickle. I finally painted the dining room the pale green I'd always wanted. Everything was slowly becoming ours. Russell? Well, I heard things. A mutual friend mentioned he and Clara were having problems. That he lost his job. That she tried to start a small lifestyle blog that went nowhere. That he'd been seen drunk at a company Christmas party last year, slurring his words about how she ruined his life. I didn't think much of it. Not because I didn't care, but because I had too much on my plate to give him more space in my head. Then, on a gray Tuesday in early October, I saw her again. I was in the middle of reviewing quarterly numbers when my assistant buzzed me, "There's someone here to see you. She won't leave. Says it's urgent." I sighed. "What's her name?" A pause. "Clara." I hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in over a year. When she walked into my office, it was like seeing a ghost, only this ghost had bags under her eyes and hair pulled into a loose bun, the shine completely gone. Her blazer was creased. Her hands trembled as she held her purse tight against her side. She didn't sit. "I know this is incredibly awkward," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "But I didn't know who else to come to." I stared at her. I wasn't angry anymore, just detached. Like looking at a character in a movie you stopped watching halfway through. She inhaled sharply. "It's Russell." He's not doing well. I said nothing. He's drinking a lot. He hasn't held a job in over 6 months. He burned bridges with old colleagues. Nobody wants to take him on. I raised an eyebrow. Why are you telling me this? Because he keeps saying, you're the only person who ever believed in him. That you knew his worth when nobody else did. He thinks maybe you'd consider helping him. Hiring him, even part-time. Just something to get him back on his feet. I leaned back in my chair, stunned, not by the request, but by the audacity of it. He left me for you, I said. Do you remember that? He called me boring. Said I wasted my life folding laundry. And now you're asking me to save him? Tears welled up in her eyes. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. I'm not asking for me. I left him. 2 months ago. I couldn't take it anymore. The drinking. The anger. The blame. I lost myself trying to fix him. Her voice cracked. I'm only here because I know how much you meant to him. Even if he didn't realize it until too late. I didn't say anything. She looked around the office, photos of the girls, art they made me, framed awards. Then she nodded slowly. You're doing well, she said quietly. I'm glad. And just like that, she turned and walked out. I didn't stop her. After Clara left, I just sat there. My office felt strangely quiet, like the air had thickened. I stared at the door she'd just walked through, my heart thudding, not out of sadness or anger, but something more complex. Not once in the last 3 years had I imagined this moment. Her, walking in. Not triumphant. Not gloating. But worn down. Exhausted. Almost afraid. I stood up and walked to the window, staring down at the parking lot below, watching her walk to a silver sedan, older model, dented on one side. She paused before getting in, leaning against the driver's side like she needed a second to breathe. I should have felt vindicated. Maybe some part of me did, but mostly, I just felt cold. Like she'd dragged in the winter with her. That night, I stayed up later than usual. I poured a glass of red wine, sat at the kitchen table in my robe, and stared at my laptop, half answering emails, half reading the same sentence over and over again. My phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. I hesitated, then answered. A pause. Then a voice I hadn't heard in years. Marin. It was Russell. He sounded older. Not just in age, but in energy. Like life had dragged him by the collar through the mud and back again. I wasn't sure if Clara would actually talk to you. I didn't say anything. Just let the silence stretch. He filled it quickly. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from. But I just wanted to say. I'm sorry. Another pause. I think about everything I said. What I did. And there's not a day that goes by where I don't wish I could take it back. Still, I said nothing. My thumb hovered over the end call button, but I didn't press it. You were never boring. I was scared. You made life work, and I didn't know how to live in something real. That's on me. He exhaled loudly, like he'd been holding the breath for years. I'm not asking for anything, okay? I just needed to say that. Clara's gone. I'm alone. And maybe that's what I deserve. I swallowed. Why now, Russell? He didn't answer right away. Because when everything else fell apart, the only thing I could remember clearly was the way you looked at me like I was still worth something, even when I wasn't. I let those words hang in the air like smoke. I've been going to meetings, he added. Trying to get clean. I don't know what I'm doing half the time. But I'm trying. I thought, maybe if I could start over, somewhere, somehow. You want a job? I cut in, voice sharper than I meant. He chuckled, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was brittle. Hollow. No. I mean, I did. But not anymore. Clara told me how it went. I get it. I didn't say anything for a long time. He stayed on the line, quiet, like he was waiting for a verdict. Russell, I said finally. This isn't how healing works. You don't climb back by leaning on the same people you broke. I know, he said. Believe me, I know. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't beg. He just let it be. For once. When I hung up, I sat there in the dark, listening to the hum of the fridge and the creak of the old house. I thought about the years I'd spent holding everything together while he unraveled. The times I blamed myself. The nights I lay awake wondering what I'd done wrong. But now I knew. I hadn't done anything wrong. I just outgrew the person who thought growing meant getting attention and newness, not building something that lasts. Over the next few weeks, I didn't hear from Clara again. Or Russell. Life, as it tends to, moved forward. I was prepping for a new product launch with our biggest client yet, a firm in Chicago that specialized in eco-tech. I'd been flying back and forth for presentations, and the girls had started calling me Boss Mom, which they found hilarious and I secretly loved. I was different now. The kind of different you can't fake. The kind you earn. But then one afternoon, as I was packing up after a client pitch, I got an email that made my heart stop. Subject, a recommendation request from Russell Barrett. It was short. Just 3 sentences. Marin, I've been applying for positions outside the state. A small firm in Vermont asked for a character reference. I understand if you can't. But if there's any part of you that believes I can still turn this around. Thank you either way. Russell, I sat with that email open for a full 10 minutes. Not moving. Not typing. What do you do when someone who broke you finally wants to rebuild, just not with you? I didn't know. Not yet. But I knew one thing for sure, I had the power now. Not in a vengeful way. In a grounded, calm, deeply earned way. And that kind of power? It doesn't scream. It doesn't lash out. It decides. I didn't respond right away. Not because I wanted him to sweat, or because I wanted to hurt him in return. But because I genuinely needed to sit with the weight of what he was asking. Russell wasn't asking for money. He wasn't asking for a second chance at love. He was asking for something harder, a second chance at dignity. A character reference. The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 years ago, he tore my character apart without blinking. Laughed at my silly suburban routines, joked to his coworkers that I spent my days organizing Tupperware and wiping snot. And now, he wanted me to vouch for him? There was a time when I might have responded immediately, emotionally, impulsively. When I still operated from the part of myself that wanted justice, or maybe just acknowledgement. But this version of me? She sat with things. She made choices, not reactions. That night, I closed my laptop, went upstairs, and peeked in on the girls. Madeline was asleep with her cello book still open on her bed, one hand dangling off the side. Nora was curled up in a ball, snoring softly, the cat wedged against her side like a tiny guard. I stood there in the doorway, hand on the frame, and thought, this is my legacy. Not my marriage. Not my divorce. But these 2 souls I've raised in the middle of a storm I didn't choose. And we came through it. The next morning, I called my sister, Beth. She lived in Albany with her partner and 2 boys. She'd been my lifeline during the divorce, the one who mailed me frozen casseroles and sent texts like "You're not crazy" when I needed them most. I told her everything. Clara's visit. Russell's call. The email. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "So what do you want to do?" "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me wants to delete it and pretend I never saw it. But the other part? I don't know. I keep thinking about what it cost him to ask. Beth snorted. Took him 3 years, rock bottom, and probably a bottle of whiskey to grow the spine. I laughed, because it was true. But then she got serious. You always did see more in him than he deserved. That was your gift. And maybe still your curse. Her words stayed with me all day. That afternoon, I found myself rereading the email again. I pulled up the job listing. The firm in Vermont was small. Community-focused. Environmental consulting for rural development. A job I think the old Russell, before the bitterness, before the ego, would have actually enjoyed. I closed my eyes and tried to imagine what would happen if I said no. Maybe he wouldn't get the job. Maybe he'd spiral again. Or maybe he'd figure it out anyway, just with one more door closed in his face. But what if I said yes? Not to invite him back into my life, but to let him walk through a door on his own, for once, without burning it down. I typed slowly. Carefully. Truthfully. To whom it may concern, I worked closely with Russell Barrett for over a decade, both professionally and personally. He is a man who has made significant mistakes in his life, many of which I experienced firsthand. But I also believe he's trying to grow. He's made efforts to change, to take accountability, and to rebuild. I cannot speak to who he is today with certainty, but I can say that, once upon a time, I saw in him someone with potential, intelligence, and genuine care for others. If you choose to bring him into your organization, I hope he proves worthy of the opportunity. I didn't sign it warm regards or sincerely. I just wrote my name and sent it. Then I closed my computer and exhaled. I didn't tell Russell I sent it. A few days later, I got another email. Shorter this time. Thank you. I got the job. I start in 2 weeks. I won't contact you again. I just wanted you to know. I won't waste it. And just like that, he disappeared from my inbox. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Weeks passed. Fall turned to winter. Work picked up. The girls started planning their Halloween costumes. Nora wanted to be a giant pigeon. Madeline insisted on being a vampire librarian, which I fully supported. One evening, after a long day of meetings, I came home to find a manila envelope on my porch. No return address. Just my name, handwritten in blue ink. Inside was a letter. Not from Russell, but from Clara. Marin, I don't know if this will reach you or if you'll even want to read it. But I had to try. I've spent the last few months trying to make sense of everything. The mess we made. The damage I helped cause. I see it now in ways I couldn't before. When I met Russell, I thought I was rescuing him. But I wasn't. I was enabling him. You weren't boring. You were solid. Kind. Patient. The kind of woman who builds real things. I'm not proud of my role in what happened. I've started therapy. I've moved back home to stay with my sister while I try to get my life in order. I wanted to thank you. Not for what you did for Russell, but for what you showed me about strength. About motherhood. About the quiet kind of power I used to mock. I'm sorry. For everything. Clara, I sat with the letter for a long time. Longer than I expected. And as strange as it sounds, I felt something soften in me. Not forget. Not forgive. Not yet. But soften. Because sometimes, when life breaks us, the sharp edges stay long after the wound has healed. But if we're lucky, really lucky, we learn how to hold them without cutting ourselves again. The letter from Clara stayed in my drawer for months. I didn't frame it or tear it up or dramatically burn it over the sink. It just sat there, in the dark corner of my desk, between an old-school photo of the girls and the warranty card for a blender I never used. It reminded me of what I'd survived, but also what I'd chosen not to become. Bitterness wasn't my endgame. But that didn't mean I was going to let people forget. A few months later, I was invited to speak on a panel at a regional women in leadership conference held in Boston. My team had grown by then, we'd recently opened a second office in Providence, and I was mentoring younger women trying to re-enter the workforce after taking time off for family. It became something of a personal mission. I gave a talk on resilience, on motherhood, on reinvention. It wasn't flashy, but it was real. I shared parts of my story, not the names, not the messy affair, but the truth. About being underestimated. About being told I was boring. About rediscovering my voice while folding onesies and managing snack schedules. Afterward, a small crowd gathered to speak with me. One woman asked if I'd ever thought about writing a book. Another asked if I offered mentorships. One attendee, around Clara's age, told me my words made her feel like she could finally leave her toxic boyfriend. And then, this part almost made me laugh, someone handed me a business card for a podcast called Midlife Moves. "You'd be perfect," she said. "You have the kind of story that sticks." That night, driving home from the conference, I felt a calmness settle over me. Not victory. Not revenge, really. But something deeply satisfying. Russell once said I was boring. Now I was being asked to speak on panels and record interviews because my life was the opposite, because I had depth, grit, value. Because I rebuilt from rubble. Then, one day in early spring, I got a LinkedIn notification. Russell Barrett has updated his employment, environmental consultant at Green Edge Consulting, Vermont. I clicked, mostly out of curiosity. His profile photo was a new one. He looked thinner. A little older. But there was something different in his eyes, less arrogance, maybe. Less projection. I scrolled down and noticed something that made my stomach flip, not out of anger, but surprise. Under recommendations, there it was, Maren Delaney, Director of Strategy at Wavelength Partners. A one-line blurb, believed in me when no one else did. I shook my head. Not out of annoyance. Out of closure. About 2 months later, I was invited to speak at a networking brunch in Burlington. A women-run organization was highlighting successful female entrepreneurs who had re-entered the workforce after motherhood. I said yes. It wasn't until I was checking in at the venue that I realized where the event was being held, just down the street from the office listed on Russell's profile. Small town. Smaller world. After my talk, I lingered near the coffee station, chatting with attendees. Someone mentioned they shared office space with another firm. Green Edge, she said. Our neighbor. One of their consultants sat in on your talk this morning. Quiet guy, but he looked emotional. I didn't ask his name. I didn't need to. A week later, I received a handwritten note in the mail. No return address. Inside was a small, folded card. Maren. I sat in the back of that room. I didn't expect you to be there. I didn't expect to feel everything I felt. You spoke like someone who made it through heck and decided to plant flowers there. You don't owe me anything. But I needed to say, you became everything I was too small to appreciate. I hope your daughters grow up knowing exactly who you are. Or I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because that was it. That was the revenge. Not petty. Not loud. Not cruel. The revenge was in becoming someone so whole, so grounded, so unapologetically rebuilt, that the people who tried to break you had to sit in rooms where your name carried weight. The revenge was in standing behind podiums while the ones who left you behind sat in the back, quietly realizing they traded down. The revenge was in the silence that followed, where you no longer needed to yell, or cry, or prove anything. You just were. Unshakable. I framed that last note, not because I needed the reminder, but because every now and then, when I feel small or tired or overwhelmed, I look at it. And I smile. Because I remember that I didn't just survive. I outgrew every single person who once thought I was boring. And I did it beautifully.